By January 2017, a podcast made by one person, with no network and no budget, had climbed to number 2 on the entire Apple charts. It beat shows with production teams, marketing money, and celebrity hosts. Its secret weapon was almost insulting in its simplicity. It never told you what actually happened. Every episode ended in the same place it started: total, deliberate uncertainty. The show is called Unexplained, created and hosted by British writer and musician Richard McLean-Smith. It launched in 2016 as a narrative non-fiction series exploring mysteries, folklore, and alleged paranormal phenomena. There was no team of researchers, no studio backing, just one man building a global audience out of stories nobody could fully explain. Each episode runs 25 to 35 minutes, and each one locks onto a single strange event or a cluster of related ones. The show pulls from historical records, eyewitness accounts, and academic research to build its case. It sounds almost like a documentary crime series, except the crime is never solved, the suspect never named, the phenomenon never confirmed or debunked. Here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Most true crime and mystery podcasts exist to deliver a resolution, a confession, a verdict, a twist that ties everything up. Unexplained does the opposite on purpose. It sits with you inside the not knowing, refusing to manufacture false closure just to satisfy an audience. Critics noticed exactly this. The reviewer at Find That Pod called it a thinking person's scary podcast and gave it 4 out of 5 stars, praise built entirely around restraint, not shock. In an industry addicted to jump scares and cliffhangers, a show that trusted its listeners to sit with ambiguity was somehow the one that stood out. In 2021, the New York Times recommended the podcast, specifically praising how the show resists the urge to ham it up. Think about how unusual that compliment is for a horror show. The highest praise it received wasn't for being scarier, it was for being quieter, more careful, more honest about what it didn't know. The Financial Times and The Guardian both reviewed it positively too, and Apple placed it on its official Best of 2016 year-end list, in the very same year it launched. A one-man narrative podcast about unsolved folklore and paranormal claims was, within months, sitting alongside the biggest shows in the medium. So what actually fills these episodes? Mysteries, folklore, and alleged paranormal phenomena, real events, real disappearances, real reported sightings, dissected using genuine historical documentation rather than pure speculation. The show treats the paranormal the way a historian treats a cold case, seriously, carefully, without ever pretending certainty exists where it doesn't. By 2018, the unresolved stories had grown into something permanent. Richard McLean-Smith published a book, Unexplained, Real-Life Supernatural Stories for Uncertain Times, through Scepter, taking the podcast's ambiguity and giving it physical, printed form. The mysteries that lived in your headphones now sat on a shelf, unresolved in ink instead of audio. Notice the subtitle, For Uncertain Times. That's not accidental marketing. It's the entire thesis of the whole project stated outright, that living without answers isn't a flaw to be fixed, it's simply the human condition, and maybe the honest response is to sit inside it rather than paper over it with false endings. Then in 2019, McLean-Smith pushed the concept even further with a related podcast called The Forest, a choose-your-own-adventure-style horror series. This wasn't just unexplained storytelling anymore. It was unexplained storytelling where the listener themselves controlled which branch of the mystery they walked down next. The Forest drew its inspiration from Baba Yaga, the Slavic folkloric figure, a witch said to live deep in the woods inside a hut that stands and moves on giant chicken legs. She is one of folklore's most unsettling figures, neither fully evil nor fully helpful, existing in the same gray zone the whole show seems obsessed with. In a choose-your-own-adventure format, every listener technically experiences a different version of the story. There's no single canonical ending anyone can point to and say, that's what really happened. It's the unexplained format taken to its logical extreme. Even the structure of the story itself refuses to resolve into one fixed truth. So why did any of this work? Why would hundreds of thousands of people choose a show that promises, up front, never to answer the question it raises? Somewhere between the historical records and the eyewitness accounts, listeners weren't actually looking for a solution. They were looking for permission to sit with a question and not need it closed. There's a strange irony buried in all of this. A podcast literally named Unexplained, reviewed for refusing to ham it up, praised for its restraint, built almost entirely around not knowing, became one of the most explainable success stories in the medium's short history simply by refusing to explain anything at all. From a launch in 2016 to a number 2 chart position within months, from glowing reviews in the Financial Times and Guardian to a spot on Apple's year-end best of list, to a published book and an entirely new interactive horror series, the growth never came from resolving anything. It came from protecting the mystery. The podcast is still running, still built the same way: historical records, eyewitness accounts, academic research, and an ending that never quite arrives. Every new episode adds one more case file to a pile that, by design, will never be closed. That's not a bug in the format. That was always the entire point. So the next time you finish an episode and feel that itch, that need for a clean answer that never comes, remember that's not a failure of the storytelling. That's the whole design working exactly as intended. If unresolved mysteries like this one pull at you the way they pulled at millions of others, follow along, because some questions are worth sitting with.